can I thank you for staying the course? As many of you know, this was meant to have been a conference that took place at Ludlow Racecourse back in May, where we would have had breakout rooms, the interaction with people, gained energy and so on from the people we met. With Zoom, it is much more difficult to do that. So I admire all of you for sticking with it and putting up with the technology. As wonderful as it is, it also has difficulties. So the last bit, can you zoom in on your document to make it bigger, somebody has said. Probably. I'm not sure how I do that. I'm gonna repeat the questions anyway. The last session, which I'm afraid we're gonna have to run pretty much as the others, in the sense that we'd like you please to use chat, initially at least, is rather more discursive, and it's sort of, where do we go from here? We've been presented with, to some extent, a menu of opportunities, the exploration of the possible, but this is about, sorry, someone is, not to worry, I will put, yeah. This is about sort of the next steps, and for some of us at least, that is about developing this action plan for the area, which we would like to do by spring of next year. An enormous thank you to those of you who have volunteered information in the chat room already. We have gathered an awful lot of sort of stuff, and so that please continue to do that. Use the website, feedback to us in the days and weeks after the conference as well. But the three questions that I'd just like to get your take on is, what are the priorities locally? Where should we be concentrating our effort? What networks, groups, etc. do we need to connect with to develop and implement a local plan? And are there things that you have seen elsewhere which should rightly inspire us? So what are the local priorities? Who do we need to connect with if we haven't already? And have you seen things elsewhere which has inspired you and which we need to look at and begin to evaluate? And some of you have fed in those questions as well. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen now and sort of leave it open to the rest of you, if I may, to begin to put things into chat. But we want this not to be just a chat session. We want you to have the opportunity to ask questions, pose challenges to the rest of us. So if you've got things to say, please flag up and I'll invite you to unmute and say it. I think it's the only way we can do that with 50 people present in the room, rather than, or if nobody, you could try just breaking in. But so those are my three questions. What are the priorities locally? Who do we need to connect with if we haven't already done so? And what have you seen that's inspired you that we might evaluate? David H, I don't know what the H stands for, but I can actually see you on my screen. Would you like to pose the question you've just posed in chat to everyone and see where we get to? You need to unmute.
Right. I just wonder whether there's scope for a really big buy local campaign in order to address a large number of the issues that we've heard about this afternoon. We have these buy local campaigns. You see things like buy British and red tractors and all this sort of thing. But it seems to me that it's bitty. It happens for a short period of time. It doesn't continue. It doesn't repeat itself regularly. And we could do a lot more on getting people to buy local.
Thank you. Any views or experience on that from other people? Obviously, Daphne's talk was essentially about some sort of buy local, but how might we expand those things? I'm not sure chat is going to work. Just break in, and if it becomes a free-for-all, then we'll go back to some semblance of order. So if you've got something to say, please say it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There is a buy local, a long-standing buy local in Ludlow. So I think one has to build on what's already existing and be very careful you don't squash people's initiatives.
Yeah, thank you.
And I should say, whilst I'm on the line, there are some very good examples of development of local buying within communities and organic food on the continent, particularly in Germany, Switzerland, and Denmark, which might well be very interesting.
Yeah, and Alison has made the point that buy local is the other end of the equation is grow local. So yeah.
Hi, can I make a comment?
Please.
Hi, I'm Ruby. I live in one of the villages above Ludlow in the hills, and buy local is okay. I mean, that's great. Yes, I always try to buy local, but that involves quite a long round trip by car because there are no buses, there's no public transport, and buy local is very, very important, but if we don't have the rest of the infrastructure to support that, the only way I can buy food without going in the car for a long period of time, pre-COVID, was to order from Tesco. And Tesco don't stock local food. So there's a bit of a circular kind of catch-22 thing going on here. And I wondered if anybody's got any ideas how to break into that.
It certainly has to be addressed in the final report, although we've gone into our sort of little silos of energy, transport and land use. How we integrate the results at the end, as you're pointing out, is really important. Any comments on that particular point from anybody? How we square the circle?
I'd like to comment.
Please, yeah.
Hi, guys. So this is partly what we're trying to do at Marches Grow Local, which I think is a model that can be scaled up, which is to connect people with land that they are not necessarily using with people who want to grow, and give the training with the growing so that we can start. There's no point in doing a huge eat local if there isn't also a huge grow local. If what is being grown locally is tens of thousands of acres of oilseed rape, that's completely useless. So we need to be building to show local landowners that there is a market for good, nutritious food grown on their land, and that there are people who are prepared to do the fairly backbreaking work of growing it, and that people want to buy the results. So it has to have at least 3 prongs to that, I think. But that's, with Marches Grow Local, that's what we're trying to do, is link up people with land with people who want to grow, and both of those with appropriate markets. Lizzie might want to come in on that a bit more.
No, that's a really good summary. Thank you, Amanda. I guess I just wanted to say that I completely take Mark's point around not wanting to step on toes as well. So how we started this initiative was we did a survey. We tried to get that as many responses as we possibly could. I think there were over 350 in total. So I can paste the link in the chat again. We are going to circulate the results in the next few weeks, and we are really at the stage of deciding what our foundation is, and obviously we'd like feedback on that from lots of key people in the area doing similar things or who are interested in this. So yeah, really keen to kind of involve other people along this journey and hopefully build a really strong, sustainable local food network.
Thank you.
Can I jump in, Nick? It's Rosie here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be heretical as usual. Buy local is great in principle, but local in any part of the world is not a byword necessarily for quality, animal welfare, low carbon or anything else. So I'm one of those people that likes to buy local, but only when I know how and where it is being produced. So in terms of stimulating buy local, I think it should be that there is a mark of buy local. I don't know, the Marches mark of something or other. Marches quality produce that is attainable if you reach particular standards. So James's standards on beef production, very high. I'm sure that would earn that kind of local mark. I know a number of sheep farmers local to me where I buy my lamb and mutton direct. They would qualify for very high standard mark as well. And it would give people an opportunity to buy stuff which isn't merely local, because as I think Manda has said, it could be miles square of oilseed rape, but also local, which fits with the values that we understand are going to address the climate challenge and address the biodiversity challenge as well.
Yeah.
Can you have a mark for it?
So value-led farming, value-led growing as well.
Yeah.
Can I invite Tim Small, please? Tim has sort of posed quite a big question that a number of us have been wrestling with. Tim, are you there to actually ask the question of everyone? No? Or you're muted? If not, I'll ask it for you. I mean, the question was, how do we mainstream some of these ideas with large commercial farms? And to some extent also with corporates who have a footprint in the patch, because you know, if you're a poultry producer, generally speaking, you're producing for a big company. You're not producing to sell at the doorstep. And that food chain is going to be looked at through the food strategy that I mentioned this morning, but and a report's going to be made with some recommendations. But how do we crack that locally? Has anyone got any sort of particular comments or ideas? Now an ominous silence, like a dentist's waiting room.
Hi.
Yeah, please, Mandy. Yeah, sorry, I can see very few people, so I'm afraid if you've something to say, please jump in.
I just put a link to a podcast in the chat because I think I don't have an answer, but I think it's a question that's being asked nationally. So the Farmgate podcast is a national podcast, which is the aim is to increase understanding of regenerative agriculture, which is it's largely the area that we're talking about, where we're looking at carbon sequestration, increasing biodiversity, reducing soil loss, improving soil, finding much more regenerative ways to produce food. And the Farmgate podcast is run by farmers for farmers. It's not flaky people like me. And that's exactly what they're beginning to look at in their overall podcast. I think we want everything to be grassroots up. That's part of what this conference is about. But I think there are times when top-down will work better. If the government passed a law that said, as of tomorrow, you're only going to get funding and subsidies if everything you do is within these regenerative boundaries, it would happen. So I think pressurizing government actually for changing farming is one of the ways where top-down will work better than trying to spend a lot of time and effort converting every single individual farmer in an area. I'm not saying we don't do both, but I think also lobbying Philip Dunn specifically, because he is chair of the Environment Committee, to get this to happen will be very useful. I thoroughly encourage anyone who comes onto the working group. I think this is a podcast. If you ever do podcasts, it's a podcast that's well worth listening to. I'll stop now.
Thank you. Any other comments from people? I say you just have to jump in, I'm afraid, because I cannot see you. Andrew's raising a hand. No? Yes.
Andrew wants to say he wasn't raising a hand. Rosie was raising a hand. But
sorry, Rosie, you're raising a hand. Okay.
Because of our broadband problem. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I wanted to echo very much Phil Holden's question, which is that land management, land use isn't simply about food production, and we should look at the broader range of benefits around more effective and much more sympathetic ecosystem management, but also to shout yay to Manda's point. There is a limit to what individuals can do by persuading their friends and their neighbours and trying to do the right thing by buying with the right mark, whether it's the Organic and Soil Association mark, or whether it's something like March's area quality, or, you know, make it up as you go along. So I think we need to find a way of bridging the gap between the bottom-up aspirations of a conference like this and the community that it represents, together with the political levers for change that only decision makers nationally and regionally can wield. So Manda's point about Philip Dunn, he's the chair of the Environmental Audit Committee at the moment.
Yeah.
They are starting an investigation into addressing the biodiversity crisis. It's people like Philip, and it's things like parliamentary committees that we need to try and influence, as well as one another's neighbours and one another's friends. And I think it can feel a bit overwhelming for individuals to feel that they have to make all of those changes for themselves. So a long way around saying yay to Manda.
Yeah, and I think, if I may, and people have already expressed, there is a third dimension to that, which is how we support individuals who are in a change process and who find it quite frightening and bewildering. I mean, as James mentioned, it was frightening. He had to learn a new language and so on. And I think it poses a question for all of us: is where do we find the emotional, spiritual, physical energy to do some of these things, and how do we support each other in that? So it's a sort of community approach rather than just loading it onto individuals to make the transitions. Does that make sense? I don't know. I know a lot of people that sort of get not just Zoom fatigue, but environmental fatigue, because we've been talking about these issues for a long time. And yes, things are moving, but how do we maintain the energy in what is still a marathon?
Very much agree.
Well, just to pick up on a couple of my points, so at a local level, public procurement is a way forward for developing markets for sustainably produced food. It's not easy, and our experience with schools has been very frustrating because at the end of the day, a number cruncher suddenly eliminates it because there's a temporary extra cost. But nonetheless, this is one way forward that we should seriously consider, particularly when we think that schools and hospitals have got our most vulnerable customers. And at the other end, I think it is about influencing government policy, which is what's going to have the effect in Europe. There's a target now of 25% organic farming across Europe, and that they will put in place a whole raft of support measures to make sure that happens.
Thanks, Mark. Joe has requested to make one further point on growing local and buying local. Joe, are you there?
Yes, thanks. It was just in response to Ruby's point, just referring back to Daphne's really inspiring presentation about the hyper-local approach, and that perhaps that's what we need replicated everywhere, sort of local market gardens. And then it also addresses other areas such as building communities, neighbourhood, sense of neighbourhood, and it provides resilience, food security, gives local people an opportunity for skills training and health and well-being. The community supported agriculture model, where people actually get directly involved as well, or underwrite farmers for a share of the harvest. And yeah, it's just thank you.
Thank you very much. We are being bidden to, sorry, someone wants to say something.
Sorry,
You have to be quick. We've got about a minute left before we get diverted back through the ether.
A lot's been talked about the big scale. Let's also think about the small scale, about lots and lots of people producing small amounts of food who aren't coordinating well with each other. And one of the big problems is the demise of the village shop, I believe. But the new village shop that is coming and is possible now is infinitely smarter than the old tin of beans lined up on in a dusty old place. There are enormous possibilities, and I think we ought to think about that.
Thank you. Can I, on everyone's behalf, thank all of you for putting up with this marathon Zoom session, but especially for the quality of the input. I mean, there's a lot there that we're going to be sifting through. We will get back to you, and I look forward to seeing you very briefly in the plenary. So I think we leave the room now, and farewell, because I probably won't get a chance to say goodbye to any of you again before this afternoon.